Welcome to Positive Charge, a new podcast from GeekWire, sponsored by Amazon Sustainability.
I'm Lisa Stifler, a former cell biologist who outgrew fruit flies and brought that science curiosity to a career in journalism.
And I'm Laura Scott. I'm an independent audio producer and journalist with a lifelong interest in science and the environment.
Positive Charge by GeekWire explores the technology breakthroughs seeking to solve the planet's biggest sustainability and energy challenges.
We'll take you inside some of the most interesting and bold companies in the Pacific Northwest to learn about and meet the people doing this critical work.
On this episode, PFAS Forever Chemicals, we explore the Herculean challenge of trying to destroy long-lived contaminants that pollute water and soil worldwide.
What are PFAS anyway?
PFAS are everywhere. They're almost certainly in your house right now. They are an ingredient that was used in many kinds of nonstick pans. They're in food packaging. If you've got waterproof and stain-resistant clothing and fabrics and carpets, they're there as well. And they've also been used for decades in firefighting foams.
And the worst part is they don't stay put. They leak into our water and into our soil. People everywhere are exposed.
And they're linked to a lot of really serious health effects. Reduced immune response, developmental delays in children, multiple cancers, and hormonal impacts.
There's hope. Entrepreneurs are now deploying technologies that aim to make PFAS eternal no longer.
But first, I want to take you to Alaska, 100 miles south of the Arctic Circle, to meet Heather Koponen. Heather is a retired physician's assistant who lives on the outskirts of Fairbanks in a home once owned by her parents. A few years ago, she went to a screening of Dark Waters. This is a movie about PFAS Forever Chemicals. It stars Mark Ruffalo. She went kind of on a lark, but she really liked the movie, and she stayed for a panel that was organized for it afterwards.
Well, at the panel discussion, they said that they had brought a whole bunch of free PFAS water test kits that were, anybody wanted to test their water, they could take a test home and test their water.
And so they said, here, go ahead, take these home, see what you find at your own households. And she had known that PFAS were in her area. There was a link to the firefighting foams that had been used at airports and military bases in that area to train firefighters and to put out these really tough to control petroleum and chemical fires.
I had friends who felt that their health had been compromised and had to stop using the well water that they had had for decades. But I was 15 miles further west on a hill and wasn't known to come from that direction.
And so she took home her kit.
And surprise, surprise, the well that my parents had put in 1966 had the best tasting water in the world and was west of the known contaminations, turned out to have high levels of PFAS. We didn't believe it.
So according to state officials, there are 519 known sites in Alaska where PFAS contaminates the water, the soil, or both. There are a bunch of lakes in interior Alaska that are closed to fishing because of PFAS. And this is just in one state. And this is a state that is wild, rugged. It's got national parks, big wildlife.
Yeah, I don't think of this kind of contaminant when I think of Alaska. I think of like a strip mall or a city.
No, I know. This is it. You would think Alaska would be pristine, but the PFAS are there. The forever chemicals are there. Across the U.S. and beyond, there are communities and governments struggling to figure out what to do about this contamination.
They're forever chemicals, but what exactly makes them never go away?
The way you build a PFAS is it has a long carbon chain, and it has a bunch of fluorine atoms on it. And for whatever reason, that makes it so repellent. And they just don't break down. They just don't break down in nature easily. If they do, they just turn into other forms of PFAS, which does not solve the problem. And it's just that they have bonds that are just tough to break. They don't want to be broken. They're very stable. But what if you could destroy these so-called forever chemicals?
Destroy them, but they're forever.
No.
Isn't that their whole thing?
No, they're not immortal. The name suggests that they are, but they're not. And there are companies who are working to do just that. They are building machines and technologies that annihilate PFAS. And two of them are located in Washington State, Aquaga in Tacoma, south of Seattle, and Cedron Technologies in a rural city north of Seattle called Sedro-Woolley. Aquaga has built a series of machines that can actually destroy almost all of the PFAS in highly contaminated water. like water taken from waste holding ponds at airports and wiping out the PFAS before it enters the groundwater. Aquagga is in downtown Tacoma. It's a really cool space on the PFAS waterway, and it's in a super industrialized area.
Yeah, when we went there, we drove off of train tracks across a little bridge and went into what basically looked like a ship dry dock building space. Lots of old wood and big beams.
It's multiple stories tall. It's just sort of a giant cavernous, sort of run down, but charming. I mean, they love it. They appreciate the charm and sort of that it's not a lot of flash.
This property is the Petrich Marine Dock. We're here in the port of Tacoma. I believe this was originally like a marble works 100 some years ago, and then they used this as a boat building space during World War II.
Brian Pinkard co-founded Aquagga, and he is also the chief technology officer.
When we moved in here, this was just being used as storage space. So there was old dusty boats and old dusty cars in here. I'd say it's a good, humble space for us that actually mirrors a lot of the operating environments where we work and where we do projects.
It was a cool space in a maritime area that is part of a former Superfund cleanup site and undergoing revitalization, though there are still many historic structures. And Aquagga's in one of them. Even this building looked like it had seen better days, but when you walk inside, there's so much cool technology in there.
They're in there doing hard work, developing technologies that are going to be deployed in crazy random places, outdoors, wherever. So it's like they're kind of keeping it real.
So what we use the space for is internal testing, customer testing, where customers will send us samples, we'll process them, prove that we can treat them. We do final assembly of our systems here. We do testing of our systems here to make sure they work as needed. And then we do sort of design, prototyping, that sort of stuff in this space. So we've made good use of it.
And so the way they're approaching it to kind of keep it simple, cheaper, deployable, is that they're putting these machines in shipping containers of different sizes. One of the original ones is called Eleanor. And you have a favorite, I think, that was there.
Marcel,
you like Marcel.
Marcel the shell with shoes on. Which we all said to Brian Pinkard, and he was like, what? It just means little warrior in French, and that's why they picked the name Marcel. But the cartoon is super cute too.
Yeah, and it's a cartoon that does well in the world. It does good things in the world, and so do these, PFAS demolition devices. And then we got to go inside of one too.
It's a little dirty. Watch your step if you want to come in. Just don't touch anything. That's the one rule.
Yeah, so it's an open shipping container. There's kind of this rack inside of it.
So the system process flow is actually relatively simple, and that's one of the reasons why we like the technology. So when we hook this up at a client site, we have some hose connections over here. That's where the water will come into the system.
So they take the polluted water, whatever the source is, and they add sodium hydroxide to it. And so that raises the pH. It makes it super basic, super alkaline. So that's like the exact opposite of what lemon juice is. Like it's that super slippery way things are basic.
The feeling that you get when you put your hands in water that you've put OxyClean into.
Yes,
Yeah.
or bleach.
We have a holding tank here, and then we have a high pressure diaphragm pump that's increasing the pressure of the fluid. So the idea is if you keep water under extreme pressure, you can heat it up to a much higher temperature before it turns into a vapor or turns into a supercritical fluid.
And they heat it way up to about 350 degrees Celsius or like more than 660 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
But it's still in a liquid phase because of that high pressure. And then we have our reactor section here, everything underneath the insulation.
A tube that Brian couldn't tell us very much about what was going on inside of because that's proprietary, but that is where they destroy the PFAS chemicals.
Right, so if you hold PFAS at these temperatures, at these pH for a long enough time, PFAS molecules will break down into the inorganic constituents. So we're talking dissolved fluoride, dissolved carbonate, dissolved sulfate. So those are all fairly benign salts. So from a high level, it's pretty simple. One pump, one fluid path, heat up, cool down, and you need a sufficient amount of time for the reaction to take place.
It breaks off the head of it. There's a compound at the head of it, and then they chop up the spine of it. It's kind of made of a bunch of carbon molecules. And then they lop off the fluorine atoms that are along that backbone. So when they're all done with it, it's not like you could take a glass of this and drink it. It's or even wash your hair with it, but it is destroying 99.99% of the PFAS that were there originally.
Wow. Why do I feel kind of bad for the PFAS after that
Don't.
violent description? I know they're so bad.
They're awful. It's like when you squish a flea. It's like, you don't want this. So Aquaga has been developing this technology since 2019, and now they're taking it out in the field. They've treated PFAS contaminated water from a lined underground pit that once held 20,000 gallons of contaminated waste. It's not far from Heather, where this was. This was up at Fairbanks International Airport. A lot of the PFAS is found in these firefighting foams. The foams just spread all over the place.
I mean, by design.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. They need to put the fires out. But then what do you do with them? Then they're just out in the environment.
Yeah, you put out a fire, but you've created an entirely different environmental hazard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just use them in testing, in practice, like they're training. They use them to train firefighters as well as to fight actual fires. And so that's kind of gone everywhere. And a number of places have banned the use of PFAS firefighting foams. The Department of Defense has an estimated 2 million gallons of these foams stored, awaiting destruction. Aquaga could help. It has 2 lines of devices that are ready to roll out. They're available for lease or purchase or demonstration projects, and they're ready to go get some PFAS.
These are just little shipping containers. Picture a quarter-size shipping container. They could pop it on a train. They could pop it on a ship and drop it wherever it needs to go. It's
Absolutely.
so portable.
Yeah, and that's one of their big selling points, is that it's not requiring places that have all these dangerous contaminants to, however you bundle them up, put them in tankers, however you transport them, and then drive them on highways or on train tracks to another place to then destroy them. You come to the PFAS, so there's not the risk of a spill or something else where this contamination could spread further. That's Aquaga. You ready for Cedron?
Yeah.
Okay. So Aquaga was launched specifically to tackle PFAS. That was always their intention. Cedron Technologies, however, did not start with that goal in mind. It launched in order to serve a glass of water made from poop to Bill Gates.
What? Ew. Why would he ever drink that?
I'm glad you asked. So we got to go back in time a little bit. In 2011, a company called Janicki Industries, and it's an aerospace engineering and manufacturing company located north of Everett. So it kind of makes sense. It's north of Everett, which is, where Boeing happens, and in Cedar-Woolley. It received funding from what is now the Gates Foundation. And what they wanted was for Janicki to create a wastewater purification system that could be used in developing countries because of their focus on global health. They were worried about untreated wastewater and all the pathogens it carries, infecting and sickening people. And so Janicki did that, and it worked. In 2014, Cedron spun out of Janicki, and shortly thereafter, they hosted Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, and they served him a glass of water produced from sewage waste. And there's a video of it. We will include that in our show notes if you want to see him drinking this glass of water from sewage. Go wherever you want to with that.
If it would please you to see that for any reason, go right ahead. Here's the link.
Yes. Let me tell you how Cedron's technology works, because it was developed for such a different purpose. So what it does is it takes municipal biosolids. So this is, the residual waste. You've got, at a wastewater treatment plant, you've got solids and you've got liquids. You kind of start to separate the two out, right? And so you take the biosolids and they dry this in a super efficient dryer. And so those biosolids, even though they're not technically the liquid phase, the biosolids have a lot of liquid. They're about 85% water. That's evaporated off, disposed of, and then you have an even more solid material. And they take that and they put it into a biomass boiler, and that produces clean electricity.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. They called it biofuel. I kind of picture kind of like briquettes, but not exactly briquettes.
Right, yeah.
Kind of,
a different kind of briquette.
Kind of a human briquette. A poop briquette. I mean, it's kind of, or a cow pie. I picture like a cow pie, like a very dried out cow pie.
Okay, yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, that's the biofuel. So they chuck those into their biomass boiler, and they toast them. And the really cool thing is that biomass boiler makes clean electricity. And so then in sort of this happy loop, the energy keeps the dryer going, And it also can go to the grid because it makes more energy than it needs to run the system.
Wow, it's like the dream of fusion come alive with biofuel.
Exactly. It is kind of like that.
So they create the power that powers their own machines.
Yeah. And then they have more to spare.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Biofuel is such a polite name for
I know.
dried poop.
Dried poop.
I also like when you said we're separating it into liquids and solids. What could those possibly be?
Exactly. Okay. So you've got a beautiful solution. So you're treating waste, you're making energy, happy. But as a super amazing benefit, additional benefit is that the system that they use can destroy PFAS. Megan Carlo, Cedron's senior permit manager, can explain how PFAS are eliminated in their process.
We hit the 3 T's, and these are sufficient time, sufficient temperature, and turbulence. So when you've got biosolids in these thermal systems that are heated above 900 degrees Celsius, they're in there for over 2 seconds, and there's enough turbulence within that system. The turbulence comes from the fluidized bed. So it's within this process that the PFAS molecule is broken down into its different chemical components, and the molecule is ultimately destroyed.
It goes above 900 degrees Celsius, so that's hotter than
What
hell.
is that in Fahrenheit? I do not speak Celsius.
I don't either.
1,652 degrees Fahrenheit. I think I'm struggling to comprehend how hot that would be.
And it only takes, they're in there for more than 2 seconds and it works. And so you might wonder, in a traditional sewage treatment plant, what happens to biosolids?
Yeah, why aren't they doing this everywhere?
Well, it's kind of a new technology. So at a normal sewage treatment plant, you again take liquids and solids and separate them. And then the biosolids are treated to kill pathogens like bacteria and viruses. But then those biosolids go back to the environment. You take the biosolids and it just is used like a natural fertilizer. You put it onto agricultural fields for crops. You put it onto golf courses or parks, and it adds nutrients. But we now realize it's also adding PFAS. It just keeps it back out in the environment, circulating, accumulating, bioaccumulating, and the problem doesn't go away.
Spreading biosolids on agricultural land, pasture, this is understandably a super cheap option.
Stephanie Dotterer is the director of strategy at Cedron.
But it's becoming super restricted lately, largely due to PFAS and in some cases nutrient pollution.
Up to this point, people weren't always looking for the PFAS and they weren't required to do anything about it. And so it just kind of kept circulating through the ecosystem, through the environment.
We're obviously seeing a lot of population growth. Everybody poops. The wastewater treatment plants, I think it's important to note, were not originally designed for the thousands of synthetic industrial chemicals that are now present in our modern day waste streams, right? They were designed to remove solids, organic waste, nutrients, pathogens. And now we have all these contaminants that are passing through our waterways, concentrating into biosolids when they come out of the wastewater treatment process. They interfere with traditional biological treatment processes. And so there's this infrastructure gap that Cedron has been able to close in a way that is both environmentally and financially sustainable.
I mean, it sounds like there's an amazing solution, and all of our wastewater treatment plants should get a huge upgrade.
Yeah, that is expensive. I mean, one of the kind of cool components to Cedron's approach is that it finances, designs, builds, owns, operates, and maintains their facilities. And they cost about $100 million to $200 million to build. But Cedron is also generating revenue from the municipalities because now it's like, send your waste to us. We're going to take care of it for you. And then it also is creating energy, which it can sell.
Yeah, it's selling energy that it's putting back on the grid.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. They have recently broken ground just this year on a regional waste treatment facility in South Florida. And that site is going to serve multiple municipalities, and operations are expected to begin there in about 2028.
I mean, listen, if Florida's doing it, you know it's because it makes economic sense for them, not because they're big of heart on the environmentalist factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should talk a little bit about what will nudge people to using Aquaga, to using Cedron, and putting these technologies in place to deal with PFAS and end this legacy of these chemicals being out there. For decades, companies have added PFAS to all kinds of commercial goods. They're in products like Teflon, that keeps your eggs from sticking to a frying pan. They're added to food packaging, carpets, fabrics, clothing. And PFAS, they are super good at deflecting water, at stains, at grease. But just like they deflect, they also migrate. They escape from the products that they're added to. And they're water soluble, so they get into waterways and they move around and they contaminate drinking water nationwide.
How can they hurt us other than just being chemicals that we don't want in our water?
Yeah.
What do they do?
Well, one of the ways they're sort of nefarious when it comes to living organisms is that they like to behave like a fatty acid. So they're going to get into your body and they're going to hang around. They're going to stay there. They're going to accumulate.
Ugh.
And so, so pretty much everyone in the U.S. has PFAS in their blood. And everywhere you look in people, they're there. So
In our blood?
they're in our blood. They're also in mother's milk. So it's this very tragic image of a mother doing what she can to nourish her baby, and she's just passing on PFAS. So there are a lot of concerns about the impacts of long-term exposure to PFAS. There are links to kidney cancer, to immune system suppression, to developmental delays in infants and children, and other really problematic health concerns.
But cleaning them up is super expensive. I mean, it is really, really expensive to address this.
I came across one academic study that estimated a price tag for removing just some of the PFAS, not all of them, every year at the same rate as we're putting them out, because we're still using them and releasing them, right?
Right.
So they're still going out into the environment. So if we were to clean up the volume that's released every year, it's on the order of trillions of dollars. It's not even billions, it's trillions of dollars. 20 trillion, 7,000 trillion per year.
Back to Brian Pinkard from Aquaga.
You have this question of like, what do you do with all these contaminated sites? What do you do with all these contaminated airports? What do you do with all these contaminated military bases? They may have PFAS plumes that are miles long. The only way to clean up PFAS from soil, you can dig it up and stick it in a landfill, or you can burn it off, literally volatilize it at 400 degrees Celsius, and then thermally oxidize the volatile PFAS, which is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly energy intensive. Or you can just sort of leave it and stabilize it in place. And I think the industry and the community as a whole is grappling with this question of like, what do we do with all of these PFAS contaminated sites? Do we, you could spend an infinite amount of money cleaning up all this soil. You could pump the groundwater for literally decades and you'd still have PFAS in the soil, even if you were treating that groundwater. How much money do we want to spend on this problem, right? How many resources do we want to dedicate to cleaning up these contaminated sites? It's really hard to make those types of decisions. And from a technical side, it's not easy to treat PFAS once it's in the environment, once it's stuck on soil.
There have been efforts to sort of regulate this. They've kind of been just existing out in the world without a lot of things to prevent this from happening. So the Biden administration in 2024 put into place the country's first ever drinking water limits on 6 forms of PFAS.
Not all of them. There's thousands.
But 6 of the more common, more troubling forms, and the limits are really, really low.
It's 4 parts per trillion, which is like a tiny drop of water in about 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Can't even have that.
No. Well, not above that.
Yeah.
You can't go under it.
You get one tiny drop.
One tiny drop. But the Trump administration has plans to nix the rules for 4 of the 6 and delay compliance on 2 others. That's kind of playing out. But states are forging ahead. There are states around the country who are saying, nope, like we are convinced this is a problem. We don't want to perpetuate this. So they have put in different regulations. Some have drinking water standards, some have monitoring, others say when and where these chemicals can be used. And taking all this together, the federal regulations, wherever they land, the state rules, they vary in how they play out. But this is creating a lot of liability. So the municipalities and the wastewater treatments, other facilities that are using these chemicals could be very vulnerable to lawsuits as they keep releasing PFAS.
Interesting. If at this point they know that PFAS are in the fertilizer that they are selling, yeah, I could imagine there'd be some liability there.
Yeah, and that's really becoming a driving force in making people step up and say, kind of pay me now or pay me later, and the later gets really expensive. So I will pay now for some kind of treatment or process to control these chemicals.
So how is Heather Koponen dealing with this back in Fairbanks?
Back in Fairbanks, beautiful Fairbanks, Alaska, she needs a solution now. She has got contamination in her well water and the family well going back to the 1960s. And she has had to cobble together a variety of fixes to deal with this situation. She knows that she's been ingesting this. She knows that she has a body burden of PFAS. So she is trying to limit her exposure any way that she can. So she has a couple of options.
Actually, it's a natural spring north of Fox, Alaska. So that water I could haul by 5-gallon jugs.
But that's an hour round trip for her to haul all these jugs and fill them up. So she can also pay a company to deliver water to her in this big tanker truck. But that has issues too.
I can buy water from a company called Water Wagon that delivers water by a big tanker truck and a hose to a holding tank. We have a holding tank. But that, even Water Wagon and other public utilities for which one pays, according to Community Action on Toxics tests, have some PFAS in them. They're not real high levels, so they're considered legal and okay. But with a history of having ingested so much already, the bioaccumulation is way up there, so it's best not to add to it at all.
And then she also has the option of using some special PFAS filters that go into a container that's kind of like a Brita filter, but it's specifically going to address PFAS. But then once those are used up, she kind of has her own little pocket of PFAS contamination in that filter.
The filters, of course, are then contaminated, so they'll have to be disposed of as hazardous waste.
So none of it is a really fantastic solution. She's kind of stuck, as are communities around the country. And what she really wants is to stop the ongoing pollution. That's really what she's hoping happens sooner than later.
So her groundwater is already contaminated, and it's getting more contaminated?
They don't know. They haven't been able to pinpoint the source for her contamination. She just doesn't know. And
That's scary.
I know. And it's hard because groundwater just moves. I mean, imagine trying to map an underwater river. It's
Right.
like, how do you know where it's coming from and going to and where it's intersecting clean water with dirty water? And so she just doesn't know.
It gets in the water systems, it gets in the soil, it spreads through the aquifers, which a lot of people don't seem to know are like underground rivers that crisscross, and different layers of them are throughout most of the earth surface.
I mean, who knows what the source is? It could be an airport out there. It could be a military base, even a firefighting station that just had it at one point.
So she's fighting for systemic change, for legislation, for regulation, because if she doesn't know where it's coming from, you just kind of want to stop it everywhere. And we should stop it everywhere. That just seems like the smart thing to do.
I know, adding to the burden's hard. I mean, and there are some limited applications where you could potentially justify it. And Heather recognizes that. I mean, it is used in some computer chip manufacturing. It's used in some medical products. And maybe used in a really judicious way under real clear safety guidelines where you're not really adding to the burden could be justifiable. That could be a reasonable solution. But again, there's this legacy of it all out in the world to be dealt with.
And could those companies that have to use PFAS use a device like Aquaga has invented to make sure that they don't leave whatever facility they're in?
Yeah, I'm sure they could. I'm sure you could have some catchment that takes water that's part of those processes, concentrates it, stores it, and then when you've got a sufficient volume, you have Aquaga treat it.
I mean, this is the future. Let's get it going.
Come
on, people.
Yeah.
Let's put this everywhere.
Yeah. So as we like to do, what are your reflections on the PFAS challenge and some of the technology that's out there to address it?
I mean, I think my knowledge of PFAS before we did this episode was, is this really going to be the thing that kills me? There's so many other things to worry about. But now I feel like there's an incredibly obvious solution to something that I thought was by name undestroyable, and we can just destroy it. Why would we not do that?
Yeah.
That's just a no-brainer.
It does seem like that. I mean,
It's really expensive, as we've talked about. And I mean, there are some compromises. You're going to have to accept a few more stains. Maybe you're going to have eggs that stick to a pan.
I mean, I love my nonstick pans. They're so easy. And I love my water repellent hiking and outdoor gear. But if it's that bad and it's just putting all of this bad stuff into our water and the places that I'm hiking around and trying to protect,
Yeah.
like, why am I buying organic eggs if I'm cooking them on a PFAS coated pan?
Yes, that is a solid point. And speaking of that water, I mean, we talk a lot about how much you and I about the Northwest, and we love our orcas.
I love the orcas.
I love the orcas too.
I know. And they
Honestly-
bioaccumulate stuff like mad.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, because they're right at the top of the chain.
Yeah, they like fatty fishes.
They build up these kinds of chemicals, these sorts of pollutants like flame retardants, PFAS. They just suck them up. Do it for the orcas, Laura.
I'll do it for the orcas. That's all you had to say. I love orcas. They're so smart. So I used to work at the Seattle Aquarium. Did you know this?
No.
Okay. I was a docent in high school. I was in their high school volunteer program.
Oh, nice.
What are your reflections?
What are my reflections?
Yeah.
I remember really well when I had my daughter, like kind of netting out because I had done research on this, on other chemical flame retardants, other different industrial pollutants, and just like I remember nursing her and thinking like, holy crap, what am I exposing her to?
Yeah.
You know, like you could do all the cutesy little things you could want to make her life as perfect and protected and bubble wrapped as possible. But it's like stuff like this you can't really do anything about. And it was kind of gutting. And then you do sort of have to move on and make your peace and know that you're trying to limit your exposure as you can and be healthy in other ways.
And hope that this isn't the thing that kills you. Yeah.
I do really believe that some of these solutions could make a meaningful difference. Absolutely. I mean, I love that Aquaga is targeting these really concentrated sources that are these, legacy stockpiles of these chemicals, or it's facilities that have been storing these away for decades, not knowing what to do with it because they've got contaminated runoff or some other source. I love that Cedron is addressing the very diluted forms of PFAS that are just in sewage water, in wastewater. And so I love that there are technologies that can hit the different points at which this stuff is dispersed. So that's kind of hopeful that you're kind of getting a range of solutions to address PFAS, because that little bugger, it's moving all over the place from all different sources and pathways.
Well, okay, I do have one more question.
Yeah, please.
What can people do if they have listened to this episode, are now having a panic attack about PFAS, and want test kits or want a system like Cedron's at their local wastewater treatment plant? How do I make that happen?
I mean, there are definitely environmental organizations that can help.
One is called Alaska Community Action on Toxics, and they're just a really cool group.
That's who was giving out the free kits and put together
The screening of the movie that Heather saw.
They've been doing a lot of testing and lobbying the different lawmakers in their state
to try to put restrictions on PFAS. And there are a lot of other groups, including Seattle-based Toxic Free Future.
The best way to really tackle this is to reach out to your lawmakers.
Let them know about your concerns. Vote for candidates who are supporting cleanup actions and supporting regulations and testing.
And while the treatment solutions from Aquaga and Cedron are going to be super important, Heather really wants to prevent the PFAS spread as much as possible before it gets into our water.
The most important thing is to stop more contamination. That is, we got to think of future generations and the future planet, because apparently the PFAS has been spread all over the planet, and most people have some of all kinds of contaminants in our bodies, bloodstreams, brains, reproductive organs, etc. So stopping it is the most important thing.
On our next episode, we'll be diving into the world of fusion. It's actually out right now, so you can go listen to it.
Fusion has amazing promise: clean, renewable energy, harnessing the chemical reactions that power the sun, like capturing a star in a jar here on Earth.
And we'll break down how that works in a way where you don't have to be a physicist to understand.
We toured 2 local companies in the Pacific Northwest who are big players in the global race to make fusion commercially viable.
And while you're here, subscribe to Positive Charge by GeekWire. Follow along, find us on GeekWire's site, and thank you again to our sponsor, Amazon Sustainability.